headlines screaming about AI doctors, they're just everywhere, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
You see chatbots telling you what's wrong, algorithms may be ready to operate. It's easy to feel like healthcare is about to become, well, maybe a whole lot less human.
Or maybe more efficient. That's the other side.
Right. Or maybe more efficient. If you're like me, you've probably wondered, okay, what's the reality behind all that, buzz?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've waded through a whole stack of expert analysis.
Okay.
We're looking at what AI can actually do, like right now, how it's being used out there in the real world, and maybe even some cautionary tales.
Right.
Where it's fallen short.
Right, to failures.
Exactly. So our mission is pretty simple, really. Cut through the noise, figure out AI's real near-term impact on your healthcare experience.
So this is like a quick guide to get up to speed.
Precisely. Think of it as your quick guide to getting informed on this, fast-moving field. We'll focus on what truly matters and maybe what might surprise you.
Okay, good. So let's jump straight into this idea then. AI replacing doctors. I mean, it's a pretty dramatic claim. We've heard it for years, haven't we?
We have, yeah. Actually, our sources point out that predictions like that, technology completely taking over medical roles, they've been around for nearly 70 years.
70? Wow.
Yeah. And what's really fascinating is that every single one of those, date-stamped predictions, every single one has been wrong. Just pushed further down the line.
So the track record isn't great.
The historical success rate of AI completely replacing doctors is basically zero. It seems the big insight is history shows these grand AI healthcare claims, they just haven't panned out, mainly because they underestimate the human side, the system complexities.
Okay, 0%. So what are these predictions constantly missing? What are the hurdles that keep the robot doctor still mostly science fiction?
Well, there are several really significant factors that often get overlooked. Regulatory approval is a huge one.
Right, the red tape.
Exactly. Putting new tech into healthcare isn't like, launching a new app. It needs tons of testing, sign-off. That takes time. A lot of time.
Makes sense.
Then you've got the whole complex issue of liability. If an AI messes up a diagnosis, who's actually responsible?
Good question. The doctor. The company.
That's the thing. It usually falls back on the doctor right now. And maybe most fundamentally, there's just the deeply ingrained culture of medicine itself. These are established systems, practices. They don't change overnight.
That makes total sense. Okay, now, what about those studies suggesting people might actually prefer getting medical answers from a chatbot? Sometimes. Anyway, I feel like I saw some headlines about that.
Yes, you probably did. There have been a couple of noteworthy studies looking at that. There was one in JAMA Internal Medicine back in 2023 looking at how people perceive the answers. And another from Stanford in JAMA Network Open just this year, 2024. Both sort of indicated, maybe a preference for chatbot responses, but specifically in text-based Q&A scenarios.
Interesting. So in that specific context, text Q&A, AI seems to be winning some favor.
Well, context is absolutely key here. These studies, they focus purely on text interactions, typing questions, getting answers back.
Right, not talking to someone.
Exactly, not the complexity of a live consultation, whether that's in person or even over video. And crucially, they didn't really look at long-term patient outcomes or, overall satisfaction beyond just getting that quick answer.
Okay.
And it's just vital to remember that the empathy these chatbots show, it's basically sophisticated pattern matching. Yeah. It simulates warmth. It's not genuine human feeling.
Ah, okay. So it sounds empathetic.
It can, yes. The insight here really is that while you might appreciate a quick, maybe well-worded text response, that doesn't automatically mean you trust it for serious medical advice.
Right. That's a really, really important distinction. A comforting tone from a bot isn't the same as, the deep reassurance you get from a doctor you trust. This brings up something I think we saw recurring in the sources. This difference between simulated empathy and, actual trust in healthcare.
Exactly that. Patients might find a chatbot handy for, basic stuff, simple questions. But when you're faced with a serious diagnosis or complex treatment choices, that need for authentic human empathy, for reassurance, it just becomes paramount.
You need that connection.
You do. Trust in a provider, it's built on so many things that go way beyond just the words being used.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit. Diagnostic accuracy. This is where you hear a lot of the hype, right? AI acing medical exams, sometimes even beating doctors in tests. What's the real picture there?
Yeah, it's true that AI has shown some pretty impressive capabilities, but usually in very controlled settings.
Like exams.
Exactly. Like MedPol M2 scored really high on medical multiple choice exams, over 80%. And GPT-4 even showed it performed better than physicians on some limited standardized diagnostic scenarios. There was that Stanford randomized trial.
Okay, those sound like pretty significant achievements, like better than doctors.
They do sound big, yeah, but it's
Yeah.
really essential to immediately contrast those successes with the far messier, more complex reality of diagnosing actual patients in the real world.
Okay, so the lab isn't the clinic.
Not at all. Multiple choice tests, simplified scenarios, they just don't capture the nuances, right? A patient's history, how vague symptoms often are, the incomplete information doctors work with constantly.
Right.
And that Stanford study, while it got headlines, it had a tiny number of participants. I think it was just 6. And they used these very structured, idealized prompts, not like a real patient conversation.
6 people is not a lot.
No, and actually, current head-to-head comparisons in more realistic clinical settings, they often show that a doctor working alone still performs as well as, if not sometimes better than, AI, or even the combo of AI plus a doctor.
So doing well on an exam doesn't automatically mean better diagnoses day to day. And I can imagine there are serious implications when diagnostic errors do happen with AI.
Oh, absolutely. And this brings us right to that critical intersection of, okay, accuracy versus liability.
Right. Who takes the fall?
Exactly. As AI models get better in controlled tests, the temptation to rely on them really grows. But when errors inevitably happen, and they will in real patient care, the legal responsibility, it still falls squarely on the human physician.
So the doctor is still on the hook.
Pretty much. The experience of Babylon Health is a good example. They made some big claims about diagnostic capabilities early on, but the healthcare system, the regulators, they ultimately held the individual GPs responsible for patient outcomes, which meant doctors ended up double-checking the AI anyway.
Which kind of cancels out the efficiency game.
It definitely reduces some of that hoped-for efficiency, yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what about personalized treatment? That's another big promise, isn't it? AI tailoring treatments based on, like, your specific genes or data.
Yeah, the potential of personalized treatment using what they call genomic and multi-omic AI pipelines. So using data from genes, proteins, all that stuff, it's definitely exciting. There's strong evidence for its promise in computational studies, like in that Estiva review from 2019.
So in theory, it looks good.
In theory, yes, but translating those computational wins into like routine clinical practice, that's been a much slower process.
Why is that?
Well, only a pretty limited number of AI models have actually received regulatory clearance for use in treatment decisions. And those are mainly in very specific, narrow areas of oncology. So getting from the lab bench to the bedside is still a big jump.
Got it. Potential there, but not widely used yet. Let's talk efficiency and maybe reducing doctor burnout. This feels like an area where AI could have a more immediate, tangible, positive impact. You hear about paperwork.
You're absolutely right. This is where we're already seeing some real benefits. Things like ambient scribes, AI that listens in and automatically documents the patient visit.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
And other auto-documentation tools, triage chatbots that help manage patient flow. These things can free up physician time. For instance, Epic, the big electronic health record company, their pilots of ambient note-taking AI showed doctors saving around 2 hours of paperwork per day.
2 hours a day. That's actually huge. That's significant.
It is, but there can be catches.
Okay. What's the catch?
The net time savings can kind of disappear or at least shrink significantly if the AI-generated notes or whatever output it is needs extensive proofreading and editing by the doctor.
So if the doctor spends ages fixing the AI's work.
Exactly. If they end up spending nearly as much time correcting the AI as they would have just doing it themselves, well, the efficiency gains become pretty minimal. It has to be accurate enough out of the box.
That's a really crucial point to consider. Okay, now, cost and access. Huge challenges in healthcare everywhere. Can AI really help here? Offer, more affordable care, reach underserved places?
Well, the vision is certainly appealing, isn't it? You hear about 247 AI primary care using telepresence to get specialists into rural areas.
This is great on paper.
It does. But there are some significant counterarguments. First, the initial costs of actually developing and properly validating these advanced AI models are really substantial big investment needed.
Okay.
And furthermore, the potential for medical errors, which we talked about, and the need for human oversight, that could easily negate any hoped for cost savings down the line.
Right, the liability again.
And we just can't ignore the persistent digital divides. Issues like internet access, having the right devices, digital literacy. If AI solutions aren't rolled out carefully, they could actually worsen existing health gaps.
Instead of closing them.
Exactly. It highlights that ongoing tension between just improving access versus ensuring care is equitable for everyone.
So technology alone isn't a simple fix for these really deep systemic issues. We've also seen some pretty high-profile failures of AI or tech companies in healthcare. What are the key lessons we can take from those?
Yeah, looking at past failures is incredibly important. You know, the cautionary tales, companies like Theranos, early versions of Babylon Services, HealthSpot, there's a list. And they showed these weren't just technical problems, like the AI wasn't good enough.
That was more than that.
Oh, yeah. They often revealed really fundamental issues with, say, misaligned incentives, particularly the intense hype and pressure from venture capital, That can push companies to overpromise and underdeliver just to keep the funding coming.
The VC hype cycle.
Definitely. They also expose big governance problems. Theranos is maybe the classic example, highlighting the dangers when you prioritize super fast growth and funding over, rigorous scientific validation.
Right, moving fast and breaking things doesn't work so well in medicine.
Not usually, no. And this connects right back to that intersection of venture capital pushing for speed and scale, clashing with the need for careful regulatory approval. We saw that with the challenges faced by Forward's CarePod concept, too.
Those failures really underscore that the tech is just one piece of a really, really complex puzzle. Okay, we've touched on several of these tensions already, but our sources kept highlighting some recurring fault lines, you could call them, in integrating AI into healthcare. Can we dig into those a bit more?
Absolutely, yeah. Fault lines is a good way to put it. One key one is that constant tug of war between the hype and the actual real-world proof.
Promises versus reality.
Exactly. The excitement whipped up by VCs, flashy product demos, it often just races ahead of the hard, peer-reviewed evidence from proper clinical trials. This creates a big lag, sometimes years, between what's being promised and what's actually been proven safe and effective, leads to unrealistic expectations.
Okay, hype versus proof. What else?
Another critical tension is that inherent conflict between liability and autonomy. We talked about liability.
Right, the doctor's still responsible.
Correct. Despite all the talk of AI taking on more responsibility, the current legal frameworks, they still hold the licensed human physician ultimately responsible for patient care. Until AI itself can somehow be legally recognized as a provider, which is a huge step a human has to oversee, co-sign decisions. And that has major implications for cost savings and how workflows are designed.
Those make a lot of sense. What are some of the other key fault lines or areas of tension?
Well, we've already discussed that gap between, simulated empathy and genuine human trust. That's crucial for patient acceptance. And there's the whole data challenge. The contrast between the sheer volume of data AI models are often trained on, which might include, synthetic data or stuff scraped from the internet.
Less reliable data.
Potentially, yeah. Versus the high-quality, well-labeled, real-world clinical data that you really need to train reliable and, importantly, unbiased AI for actual healthcare use.
So garbage in, garbage out, potentially.
Kind of. While massive data sets can improve an AI's language skills, they also crank up the risk of bias creeping in and also what they call hallucinations.
Hallucinations. You mean the AI making stuff up?
Basically, yeah. Generating incorrect or just nonsensical information. And finally, there's the potential impact of automation on professional identity.
How doctors see themselves.
Right. If the narrative really takes hold that AI will replace a big chunk of doctors' tasks, it could affect how certain medical specialties are valued, maybe even influence who goes to medical school. And that, naturally, can lead to resistance to adopting the tech widely.
So these aren't just like theoretical issues. They have very practical implications when these different forces bump up against each other in the real world.
Precisely. Yeah, think about how these things intersect. Empathy versus efficiency, for example.
Okay.
If chatbots can effectively handle routine, low-emotion patient stuff, it could free up clinicians for more complex cases. But only if the handoff between the AI and the human is smooth and keeps the patient's trust.
So the system has to work together.
Right. And we see examples of this trying to happen. Some places use AI to draft patient messages, but crucially, a human nurse still reviews and approves them before they go out.
Human in the loop.
Exactly. Then you have accuracy intersecting with liability. Babylon's experience showed that starkly. Their claims of high accuracy didn't shield the human doctors from responsibility.
Right.
Cost versus access challenges. HealthSpot's kiosks highlighted that. Despite the convenience, the high costs of maintenance and connectivity just undermine their potential to really provide affordable care in rural areas.
The economics didn't work out.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that forward care pod example, it perfectly shows that clash between the fast-paced VC world and the slower, more cautious, regulated world of healthcare.
These examples really bring those abstract concepts down to earth. And I think the point you touched on earlier about technological progress versus public perception is critical too. And AI might ace its exams.
Yeah.
But even one widely reported story of it giving the wrong drug dose, that can just tank public trust and really slow things down, right?
Absolutely. That Stanford study we mentioned, the one showing AI outperforming doctors initially, it got huge press, but then faced scrutiny about its methods. Public perception can shift really fast based on just one or two salient stories, positive or negative.
Okay. So putting all of this together then, what's the bottom line? The overall takeaway. Are we on the verge of a doctorless future or not?
That really seems to be the central question everyone's asking, doesn't it?
It does.
Based on, well, everything we've looked at, the clear trend seems to be towards augmentation, not wholesale replacement.
Augmentation, like helping doctors.
Exactly, helping them, supporting them. Narrowly focused AI models are already proving their value in specific, defined tasks, like detecting tuberculosis from x-rays or helping with that clinical documentation we talked about.
So good at specific jobs.
Very good at specific jobs. But the vision of a fully autonomous AI doctor, that seems much further away than some headlines suggest, mostly because healthcare is just fundamentally a complex socio-technical system. It's not just about processing information.
There's more to it than data.
A whole lot more.
So where are we likely to see the most immediate and significant changes then? Where's the action happening now?
The most rapid advances, the quickest wins, are likely to be in the administrative side of healthcare.
Paperwork.
The paperwork, yeah. Tasks like managing prior authorizations for insurance, automating note-taking, streamlining appointment scheduling. These are areas with relatively low clinical risk, but high levels of physician frustration and burnout.
Makes sense to target those first.
It does. They face fewer ethical and regulatory hurdles. Then, in clinical decision support, helping with diagnosis or treatment choices, we seem to be entering what a lot of people are calling a Copilot era.
Copilot, I like that.
Yeah. Regulators, insurers, hospital risk managers, they're largely converging on this idea of human-in-the-loop systems. AI can suggest things, propose diagnoses, maybe rank treatment options.
The human decides.
But the final decision and the responsibility stays with the clinician. So we should probably anticipate a gradual increase in doctor productivity rather than some sudden mass displacement of roles.
Okay, gradual change.
Oh.
And you mentioned earlier that empathy is kind of a wild card in all this. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, it really is. While these large language models can certainly mimic warm language, provide info 24/7, whether patients truly perceive that as caring in a way that builds real trust and comfort, that's going to significantly influence how much AI gets adopted in more direct patient-facing roles.
So patient perception is key.
Hugely key.
Right.
Patient trust, the perceived quality of that interaction, those will be crucial. And as our sources wisely point out, it's really essential to follow the money and watch malpractice insurance.
How so?
Well, if insurers eventually agree to actually reimburse for AI-only consultations, and if they start underwriting the liability that comes with that, that would signal a major, major shift.
But we're not there yet.
We are simply not at that point yet. Not even close, really.
Okay, so for someone listening to this, trying to make sense of it all, what are the key developments they should maybe keep an eye on in the near future? What should we watch?
Yeah, there are several areas worth watching. The evolution of regulatory sandboxes, like the FDA has this thing called a predetermined change control plan.
What's that?
It's basically a potential pathway for some AI models to update themselves, learn over time, without needing a whole new approval each time. That could speed things up if it works safely.
Okay, regulations. What else?
We should also monitor the progress of outcome-based reimbursement pilots, where insurers only pay for AI-driven triage or other services if they demonstrably lead to better patient outcomes or actually lower overall costs.
Paying for results.
Exactly. Also, the metrics around hybrid workforces in healthcare will be telling. For example, are those robot assistants sometimes used in nursing actually improving staff retention? Do they improve patient safety? We need data on that.
Real-world impact.
Hmm. And finally, keep an eye on data sharing initiatives between hospitals, where they pool their electronic health records to train AI models together. The big question there is who ultimately controls those powerful models once they're trained.
Data governance. Got it.
Mhm.
Okay, so a lot to keep an eye on. For those who just want the quick summary, the TLDR, what's the core message here?
Okay, the TLDR. The predictions of AI causing some kind of mass extinction event for doctors, they seem really overblown right now.
Okay.
The much more likely near-term future involves a gradual but still significant reshaping of the doctor's job description. Less time on admin, more reliance on sophisticated AI tools as co-pilots, and, maybe ironically, an even greater emphasis on the uniquely human parts of medicine, the empathy, the judgment, the connection that no AI can truly replicate.
So the future of healthcare looks, well, less like robots taking over completely and more like a collaboration. Humans plus AI.
That's the picture emerging, yeah.
It sounds like the focus will be on making doctors maybe more efficient, maybe improving access in certain ways, but all while keeping that crucial human oversight firmly in place.
Precisely. That seemed to be the most realistic path forward based on where we are now.
Right. And on that note, here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. Think about what truly makes you feel cared for when you interact with a doctor or any healthcare provider. How much of that experience, that feeling, do you believe a machine could realistically replicate? And how much, at the end of the day, will always require that fundamental human connection? It's definitely a question worth keeping in mind as this whole field continues to evolve so rapidly. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.